Greetings everyone. Welcome to Narayan IAS. This is Daily News Analysis. In this, we select certain important articles from the Hindu and Indian Express for detailed analysis. The articles that have been selected today are as follows. First one, a grave error in the law, which delves into the details of the recent judgment given by the Supreme Court on the legality of same-sex marriage. It is from the Hindu, page number 7. The price of persistent federal frictions, which deals with the federal tensions that we are witnessing and experiencing between the center and the states. It is from the Hindu, page number 8. Next, gold drives trade deficit to new high. As the name itself suggests, the importing of gold is actually leading to high trade deficit. That is, we are importing more when compared to the exports of our country. It is from the Hindu, page number 14. Next is NASA ISRO prepared to launch joint space mission, which is NISAR. It is from the Hindu, page number Science 2. Next, to build tunnels, rock must be thoroughly examined, more time spent on studies. It is with regards to the recent disaster event that Uttarakhand has experienced, where 40 workers were trapped. It is from the Indian Express, page number 15. Next is PM launches Rs 24,000 crore scheme for vulnerable tribal groups. It is from the Indian Express, page number 8. Now, let us start the detailed analysis. The first article deals with the judgment given by the Supreme Court and whether it is following the Constitution or not, or whether Supreme Court could have done more with regards to the legal status of same-sex marriages. The title of the article is A Grave Error in the Law, and the relevance of the topic is in dealing with the same-sex marriages, fundamental rights, role of the judiciary, and with respect to mains, vulnerable sections. Why these topics are relevant as per this article is because it involves violation of the rights of the same-sex couples who are trying to get a legal recognition from the society or through the law formed by the judiciary, which we call it as judicial legislation. The context of the article. The context is on October 17, Supreme Court has given a judgment under the Suprio versus Union of India case, where it has said that it is a duty of the Parliament to take up the issue of legal recognition of the same-sex marriages. So, it is a duty of the Parliament. Firstly, let us look into the judgment given by the Supreme Court in detail and see the reasons in favor of the marriage as well as reasons in opposition to the marriage. Firstly, the judgment given by the Supreme Court, it says that it is a role of the Parliament to take up the issue and decide upon extending legal status. Next is, Supreme Court was not in favor of giving legal status as per the civil union to the same-sex couples. Understand that the civil union is different from marriage union or marriage status, which the law of the land extends. The same-sex couples have gone to the Supreme Court and pleaded that at least they should be given the civil union status. Why legal status is being pleaded for is because legal status ultimately leads to extension of certain rights. For example, marriage couple have the rights like inheritance of property, or if there is any domestic violence, they could go and file a complaint to be resolved by the judiciary or through the legal justice system. And Supreme Court has asserted the need to end the discrimination. It has understood, or it has the view that the same-sex couples are being discriminated, and it has directed the government to form a committee and recommend measures to extend rights so that the discrimination could be reduced or ended if possible. And the minority judgment has actually viewed that it is the obligation of the state to extend legal recognition. But it has fallen short of forming a law, which we call it as judicial legislation, to extend legal status. And it has said that transsexuals could actually enter into heterogeneous marriages. That is, a gay individual have the right to enter into heterosexual relations, at the same time marriage as well. For example, a gay man could marry a woman. The Supreme Court hasn't extended adoption rights, which is one of the important concerns raised by the same-sex couples. But it was in favor of cohabitation, that is, same-sex couples could live under one roof. So this is the judgment. Now let us look into the reasons through which we could actually support same-sex marriages. The first reason is, under Navtej Johar case, Supreme Court has struck down Section 377. Section 377 has decriminalized homosexual relations. What logically follows is legal recognition to their marriage, because marriage in itself has an element of the right to indulge in sexual relations. The other reason is it is a violation of Article 21, right to live with dignity. See, legal recognition is important. Why? Because the societal law is actually recognizing their marriage. If there is no law which recognizes their marriage, or the society directly or indirectly doesn't recognize the relation between two partners as married, then obviously they will not be able to freely function as a couple in the society, either directly or indirectly. Thus, extension is important, because it is not being extended, then it is nothing but a violation of right to live with dignity because of not recognizing. And Supreme Court under Article 21 has also recognized right to privacy, because it is a private matter, and right to dignity and marital choice as fundamental right under Article 21. Thus, legal recognition is important. Next is, it violates Article 14. Why? Because here we are treating heterogeneous couples as different from homo couples or homosexual couples who are trying to enter into marriage relations. Thus, law treats heterogeneous couples differently. If that is the case, the homosexuals will not have the rights like inheritance or dealing with domestic issues, etc., which the heterogeneous couples have. There are certain advantages to the heterogeneous couples, like, for example, Hindu undivided family has certain privileges. Now, the homosexual couples will not be able to claim those benefits. What about the domestic issues that might crop up when the homosexual couples are living under one roof? And Justice Chandrachud has argued that the marriage as an institution is not universal. That is, there is no set definition of what family is. The family forms might change, and this change could be with the changes that are observed in the society. Okay? Changes that are observed in the society. Thus, family could also be constituted by same-sex couples. Thus, saying that only heterogeneous couples could form family is just an idea or notion. It is not a universal definition. Next, what happens with the legal recognition is social acceptance, right? Society follows accepting the same-sex couples as married. And if that happens, then the same-sex couples will be freely willing to indulge in the activities of the society. If there is no acceptance, their ability to freely mingle with the society gets hampered. If they mingle with the society, then we could unleash the potential of the same-sex couples as well, and thus pursue the development of the society in totality, at the same time development of the same-sex couples as well. Next, the international acceptance. What we have seen in the international arena is more than 30 countries have actually legally recognized their marriage, and close to or more than 100 countries have ended this criminalization of homosexual couples. Thus, what follows is India should also try to extend the legal status. Now let us talk about the Supreme Court's argument. Supreme Court could actually strike down Special Marriage Act, or it could extend the rights under Special Marriage Act to homosexual couples as well. That is, same-sex couples. What we are talking here is Supreme Court has got the power to do it. Why? Because the Special Marriage Act is discriminatory, as we have already seen in the previous argument. As per Right to Equality Article 14, Supreme Court could extend the rights to the same-sex couples as well. Supreme Court could indulge in judicial legislation. Why? Because It has done it in the past. Like for example, the Vishaka guidelines to deal with the sexual harassment at the workplace. Similarly, it could have extended legal status to the same-sex couples. Next is because there is a violation of the provisions of the Constitution, not recognizing the rights, as well as violation of the fundamental rights, Supreme Court has been empowered by the Constitution. Yet what we have seen is Supreme Court hasn't stepped in and it has abdicated the role to Parliament. Next, let us look into the reasons for lack of support same-sex couple marriages. The opinion of the people. Under CSDS Lokniti and Azim Premji's study, which was done in 2019, what was found is only 19% of the urban population was in favor of legal recognition. If that is the case, the societal acceptance is very low. Whatever the law that is passed by the Parliament should also try to understand societal views, whether society is accepting or not. Parliament is the voice of the society. If society is still not ready to accept, then it has to pursue measures to make the society accept and then frame the legislations. Of course, there is an issue in this argument. Many times, minority rights are accepted by the active participation of the state rather than what the society understands. Society might lack the tolerance levels to actually be empathetic towards these issues. Thus, the state actively supports the rights of the citizens. Next is, it is against the religious beliefs. The same study, that is CSDS Lokniti study, has found that close to 70% of Christians and 48% of Hindus are against it. Thus, many religious believers are of the view that same-sex marriage has no religious sanctity because there is no religious scripture or religious belief that supports the same-sex marriage. Many argue that it is in opposition to the nature. The other argument is it is in opposition to the concept of family. According to them, family is constituted by heterogeneous couples rather than the people of same-sex couples. Next is, according to many, it is a matter of the society. The acceptance of the society is paramount for the sustenance of the same-sex couples in the society. Next is the scientific question. The scientific question is whether it is a biological influence, that is, the genetics or biological influences like hormonal changes are the reasons for indulging in same-sex relations, or it is due to psychological issues. So this debate is still raging. What we need is a thorough study to be conducted and to understand whether it is a psychological issue or whether it is a biological influential issue or whether it is a biologically influenced issue to gain recognition or to gain the acceptance of the society. Next is, it is unclear how, we do not know exactly how the same-sex partners could influence the younger generation. So many are skeptical how the influence of them will lead to the learning of the social norms by the younger generation. Because the norms learned by the children lays the foundation of the society. We do not exactly know where these norms will lead them to. The next is the clarity on LGBTQIA++. Many argue that there is no end in terms of the sexual, there is no end to the extent of genders under the section of LGBTQIA++, which could actually lead to confusion in terms of recognition or to administer the multiplicity in gender claims the individual who belong to this section might make. The other is the argument of the government that the Transgender Person Protection of Rights Act 2019 actually extends rights to this section, and thus the next logical step is to decide upon the legal status to be extended to them, that is recognizing their marriage. Thus the law of the land is moving forward and is catching the societal undercurrents with regards to recognition of the same-sex marriage as well. Let us look into another article. The article is on federal tensions that we are witnessing in the country. That is, the friction that we are witnessing between the center and the states. especially the opposition-ruled states. It is said to influence on India in terms of physical relations, as well as how the revenue is being generated, revenue is being spent, etc., by the states as well as that is the central of what we are going to deal in this article. The title of the article is The Price of Persistent Federal Frictions. The relevance of the topic is fiscal federalism, that is cooperation between the states and between the center and state in terms of fiscal relations, that is revenue, capital, etc., and the cooperative federalism. How the center and states and among the states there is cooperation for the prosperity or for the development of the country. In terms of mains, GS paper 2, polity and governance, because it is the friction that we are witnessing between the center and states. Coming to the PYQ, we have one question in mains 2020 with regards to federalism, that is cooperation, competition, and confrontation. Okay, now let us look into the context. The context is increasing tension in terms of the relationship between the center and the states. The disputes that we are witnessing, and the thing is that they are persistent. We are witnessing them again and again. Tensions keep on cropping rather than being resolved, rather than being a stalemate and continuous cooperation between the center and the states. And what it is leading to is federal friction leading to the impact upon the economy, because economy ultimately depends upon the way the policies of the states are being executed. Federalism is nothing but a governance architecture where the power is shared between the center and its units, that is the center and states. Both center is allocated with certain tasks and the state is allocated with certain tasks. And they have been vested with the powers, money, etc., to execute these tasks. Why? Because there are certain tasks that are better dealt at the central level and certain tasks that are better dealt at the state level. And our constitution clearly shows the power of the center and the power of the states. And this sharing of the powers actually leads to cooperation because each will know what they are supposed to do and how they are supposed to do. So, federalism in India, as I mentioned, it is mentioned by the constitution. We look at the articles, they are enlisted under union list, state list, and the concurrent list. And the other thing which guarantees is the constitution, that is the fundamental of the land, guarantees federalism through its provisions. And it is also part of basic structure. And how we'll be able to see that the federalism is intact is empowering the central government. Central government, which is also responsible for promoting unity and integrity of the country, sees that the constitutional framework is followed by the states, and thus there is no friction among the states. And the provisions of the constitution enables the center to take care of the federal provisions as well, or else it could impose emergency on the states that they are not carrying their functioning of administration as per the provisions of the constitution. Next is the significance of the need of the federalism. The significance is to address the regional disparities in terms of the differences of the socio-economic developmental levels. The fiscal federalism gives the scope to see that the center indulges in extending more resources to the states which are backward and also providing states the freedom. The constitution provides the states the freedom to collect revenue. Right? We cannot expect state to carry out its administration without the money. And the money, how to collect it, to what extent it is to be collected. There are laws which guide them, and under using these laws, states and center function. And this enables them to be in a cooperative fashion, to work in a cooperative fashion, and thus try to pursue developmental activities. And also catering to their specific needs is each state has its own needs which might vary from other states. Center has its own needs. Of course, it is with respect to the entire country. But what we do is ultimately try to realize them through the mobilized finances. And what fiscal federalism does is it encourages decentralization because we cannot pursue all the activities from the central level. We need functioning from the state level and also from the Gram Panchayat or local government levels. And it provides economical stability because ultimately development is nothing but unleashing the potential. So fiscal federalism is essential for the development of this country. Next, the challenges that we are witnessing at the moment. The challenges is how the finances are being used, how the central usage of the finances is actually leading to differences in terms of the reactions of the states and ultimately impacting the economic capabilities of the entire country. The thing is that because the central government has been vested with the power to look into the activities at the central level, that ultimately impacts the entire country. What it will also impact is the functioning of the states. If you look into one of the case study that has been mentioned in the article, the PM Gati Shakti Yojana, which is a digital platform which tries to see that all the planning of the projects to improve the infrastructure of the country or to build infrastructure of the country are aligned at the central level such that there is coordination between the center and the states. What happens if that is the case is the projects are mostly aligned as per the liking of the center. As I said, the interest at the central level will be different with compared to the state level. Central level, the connectivity between the states is generally oriented to see that our markets are connected globally. So what happens is the needs, locally different needs will be compromised at this cost. Because now all the projects are mostly aligned to see that we are able to connect to the external markets to improve our exports or imports, etc. It is not that center is entirely trying to connect our markets to the global level, but that is generally the case which happens at the macro level. States will be better suited to look into the needs of the local markets. And what happens is now that will be pushed to the back burner. That is what we are witnessing through the execution of PM Gati Shakti Yojana. There is lack of flexibility to the states in terms of designing their plans as well as spending, and thus they are mostly relying upon the center for spending. And because they are not able to execute or formulate their own plans, which might be divergent to the central plans, their plans execution is also being deteriorated or lessened. What we are witnessing is the central's plan is mostly focused upon three states, that is Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Uttar Pradesh. The spending in these states is higher when compared to other states, and the state spending on infrastructure development is becoming less year after year. If you look into the capex, that is capital expenditure, it is 0.58% of the GSDP, which is low and compared to what is actually required for infrastructure development in this country. The current challenges in center-state relations are fiscal competition and welfare provisioning. There is competition in terms of fiscal levels, that is finance levels, between the center and states. There is competition. What does it mean? The states are competing among one another in terms of incentivizing to promote business in their own states. States fight with one another in terms of their policy decisions. They will try to incentivize states by lessening the taxes that they will impose upon the businesses. What this ultimately happens is the revenue losses to the states which need the most, but they are not able to attract the investment. At the same time, it also impacts other activities like labor laws, etc., where they try to be as flexible as possible. Thus, what happens is it becomes unhealthy over a period of time. The other thing is the distorted competition. We need not have the competition between the center and states, but the present tensions are actually leading to the competition between the center and states as well. For example, center trying to execute policies which are supposed to be done at the state level. There might be political reasons or administrative reasons behind it, but they are ultimately leading to the tensions between the center and the states. The concerns are states' dependence upon the center is increasing. They are again and again demanding that the revenue that the center is sharing with the states is lower and demanding for more revenue allocation to the states. And also, expanding central physical space is actually leading to lessening of the physical space of the states. We already seen that the spending of the states is also essential for developmental activities because it focuses on the local demands that are important and to be tackled by the state governments. The physical space of the center is expanding, that is, its physical resources are increasing, whereas states are now increasingly dependent upon the non tax revenues for increasing their revenues, which are to be used for spending. But as you know, in terms of non tax revenues, the collection is not high when compared to the tax revenues of the center. Next is impact on welfare provisioning. Provision of welfare ultimately depends upon the fiscal resources. We already seen the tensions many are facing the issue of scarcity and higher fiscal deficit levels at the states. And reports have again shown that the fiscal deficit is becoming unsustainable at the state levels. Next, what we are also witnessing is parallel policies, that is, duplication of policies, as well as executing the same policy at the center as well as state level by central government and the state government. One such example here is the national pension system. National pension system is a pension system which has replaced the old pension system. This new pension system, certain states have joined to execute this new pension system, but again they have reverted back to the old pension system levels. The increasing burden of implementing the old pension system has led to the changes done by the central government. Certain states have changed, but again they have reverted back. So this impacts the ability of the administration to execute policies. How to improve the fiscal relations or the federal relations between the center and the states? The existing areas of cooperation. There are certain areas which actually require cooperation, and we have legal provisions and constitutional provisions that promote cooperation between the center and the states. For example, the existing scope of interdependence. How there is existing scope of interdependence? Center relies on cooperation of the states in terms of execution of provisions in the concurrent lists, right? In the concurrent jurisdiction where both center and state could formulate the laws, center relies on the administration of the state to execute those policies. And also collaboration in terms of implementation of schemes at the national level. For example, we have National Food Security Act. It requires the assistance by the states to implement the scheme. And we have also administrative relations between the center and the states, which has constitutional backing through the provisions. These are both the state and center could delegate the tasks to one another, and we have constitutional provisions supporting it. For example, Article 158A of the Constitution, that the state could delegate certain administrative activities to the center. Similarly, the center could also do it. Both the parliament and state legislature also are empowered to do it. Of course, state legislature could seek the cooperation from the center, but parliament could actually direct the state execution to do the tasks. Okay, it is constitutionally binding upon the state executive to do the functioning as per the direction given by the parliament. So in this way we could promote cooperation. Why? Because constitution has envisioned to promote federation in the country, that is cooperation between the center and the states. Thus, through this, we could actually reduce the frictions and to see that the country's energies are channelized for pursuing developmental activities rather than indulging in unhealthy competition between the center and the states and among the states. Now let us look into another article. This article is on the rising trade deficit that India is witnessing. Trade deficit, as the meaning itself suggests, it is the deficit in the trade where country is involving not only importing goods and services, but also exporting of goods and services. What we are witnessing now is our imports are increasing when compared to the exports, and thus it is a cause of worry. But because ultimately we need to have dollars to buy the goods, and we have limited amount of the dollars. Indian forest reserves are significant in number, but yet we need to curtail the losses that we are incurring on account of increasing imports when compared to the exports. Now let us look into the title of the topic. The title is Gold Drives Trade Deficit to New High, which itself indicates that it is the gold which is driving the increasing imports when compared to our exports, leading to high trade deficit. The relevance of the topic is trade deficit and rising imports. Syllabus GS Paper 3 Indian Economy, issues related to mobilization of resources growth. Because we need to see that the forex reserves that we are spending could be reduced to as low as possible. Now, the context. The context is nothing but high trade deficit that we are witnessing. In the October 2023, what we have experienced is $31.46 billion of trade deficit. What is trade deficit? As we already seen, if the imports exceed exports, that is what we call as trade deficit. Let us look into the reasons for the rising trade deficit or widening of trade deficit. High domestic consumption expenditure. The Indian consumption expenditure in terms of percentage of GDP is rising year after year. The consumption is fine, but we have to also look into our investments. The savings should be increased. At the same time, our investment could be increased through the savings. But high consumption expenditure is also leading to declining of savings. And this consumption activity, which is accelerating in India, is one of the important reasons for the rise in demand of the import goods. If you look into the data, in terms of percentage of GDP, 62.5 percentage in 2022-2023 is the consumption expenditure. This is one of the important reasons for the trade deficit. The other is India is witnessing the growing middle class. This growing middle class is a reason for increasing emphasis upon the consumption. And this consumption activity, as you know, is leading to trade deficit. Added to it, the rising disposable incomes. Income minus taxes is nothing but the disposable income. This income, the percentage of spending is increasing in terms of consumption. Added to it, the infrastructure bottlenecks, etc., and the cost of logistics, both the transportation, etc., come within the logistics. The high logistics cost is one of the reasons for the unattractiveness of Indian goods. The high logistics costs ultimately reduce the competitiveness on account of increasing final prices of the goods which we export to other countries. If we reduce the expenses incurred in taking care of the logistical facilities, the competitiveness of the Indian goods might rise or can be increased because the cost incurred is lower. And India, it is estimated that 14% of the GDP is our logistics cost, whereas in the developed countries like United States, etc., they spend only 8% of their GDP in terms of logistics cost. The other is the global economic factors. As you know, globally, there is reorientation of supply chains, and we are witnessing global economic slowdowns on account of various geopolitical as well as economical factors. This is also impacting India's market in terms of exports and imports. And this is also one of the important reasons for the rise in trade deficit. Now let us look into specific reason, that is gold being one of the important factor for the rising trade deficit. The gold imports are increasing. The expenditure incurred on gold is now close to $7.2 billion. It is said to be the highest level in terms of the decade expenses incurred in buying the gold. As you know, the production of gold in India is lower, and thus it mostly relies upon the imports of gold to meet the required demand in India. Next is the festivities in India. Dasara, Deepavali, etc., has also led to increase in demand of the gold, thus leading to rising imports of gold. Next is gold being one of the attractive destinations of investing their money. It is nothing but trying to hedge the risk involved in storing or involved in saving the money. Because of the inflation, what Indians generally resort to is save their money in terms of gold. And thus, it is one of the attractive reasons for buying gold. Next, the weakening of rupee. As we are witnessing at the international level, many currencies are weakening. Similarly, Indian currency is weakening, that is depreciating, that is losing of the value at the international level. What is happening is the exports are becoming cheaper, but at the same time, we have certain imports we need to compulsorily buy from other countries because of the lack of those goods to meet our domestic requirements. Thus, the weakening of rupee is also leading to rising prices of gold, and yet those prices are high, we continue to buy. Next is the measures to reduce the trade deficit. The measures are as follows. Firstly, we need to increase our productivity. Productivity is nothing but the money that we are spending for production could be reduced, and see that we could efficiently utilize our minimal resources to produce more. How we could explain is, for example, if I am incurring 10 rupees expenses in producing a good, my target should be to improve productivity. Thus, I will improve it by reducing the cost incurred in production to 8 rupees. This is nothing but I am improving the productivity. The improvement of productivity is nothing but we could make our goods to be competitive in the international market and thus increase our sales. Similarly, we could improve the productivity of the Indian manufacturers and thus we could reduce the trade deficit by exporting the goods. Next is improving access to finances. We have to provide more and more capital so that they could use these finances, use this money to improve their productivity, to improve their production capabilities, and thus we could increase the competitiveness of our economy. Next is we have to diversify our exports. We have to produce more goods for the international market's demand. The next is exploring new product categories. For example, we have technical textiles whose demand is rising. So we have to look into the new arenas to improve our exports. Next is infrastructure development, etc., roads, railways, to actually reduce the logistical cost. One example that could be stated is the study of the World Bank, which has stated that reducing India's transit time by 20% could actually increase its export by 4%. Thus, itself is an indication that we need to take care of our logistics and reduce the time as well as reduce the costs incurred in transportation, thus, or the supply of the goods, and thus we could improve our exports. This completes the article. Let us look into the next one. Coming to the article, NASA ISRO, that is the National Space Agencies of United States and India, have collaborated to launch a project called NISA. They have signed it in the year 2014. That is what this article deals about. The title of the article is NASA ISRO prepared to launch joint space mission. The relevance of the topic is to learn about NASA, ISRO, and their project NISA. In UPSC syllabus, it is dealing with GS3 Science and Tech. Now let us look into the project. The context obviously is they are going to launch NISA, but the year is the first quarter of 2024. Now let us look into what NISA is all about. NISA is a radar and project has been signed in 2014. The objective of the mission is to make observations. Radar sends a signal and detects the incoming signal which is reflected from the surfaces to which it sends to and makes observations. And we could make observations from the signal that the radar detects, which detects the reflected signals. So, thus, we could make observations like Earth's land, ice-covered surfaces of the Earth, the thickness of the ice, the expanse of the land, etc., etc. Next is the expected launch is the first quarter of 2024. The launch vehicle is ISRO Geosynchronous Launch Vehicle Mark II. We have to know what vehicles were used to launch the satellites, or in this case, the radar. Thus, you also need to know this fact. Next is the launch site is Satish Dhawan Station. The launching orbit is sun synchronous dawn-dusk orbit. You also remember the orbit, whether it is geosynchronous or sun synchronous, etc. The duration of the mission is expected to be of 3 years. The survey frequency is that is, it is going to survey Earth's land and ice covered surfaces for every 12 days. The technical specifications. Now, if you look into this picture, we could know what the dimensions of the radar are. The synthetic aperture radar, that is the radar which is going to detect and make observations of the surface through the signal that we detect through the radar, it has L band and S band frequency detection capabilities. Next is the size and mass is the mass is 2800 kilograms. The reason for bringing this fact is we have seen the facts which are quite detailed in the examinations that have been asked in the UPSC examination. Next is the power source is the solar panels. You could look at the solar panels. These enable the supply of the power. Now let us look into the possible contributions of the NISA, the possible contribution of earth science. That is, we could measure or make observations of the earth's surfaces that has the potential to know about the extent of the ice cover, the soil moisture, at the same time the vegetation biomass. Added to it, it enables us to manage the disasters. Why? Because we could be able to, because we make observations of the earth's surface where the disaster happened. For example, we could detect the incoming ocean tsunamis. Why? Because tsunamis ultimately leads to the disturbance that are created on the ocean water by the seismic waves that are generated beneath the earth's surface. Thus, we could detect the incoming tsunamis while they are generated. Similarly, we could also detect other aspects as well. Next, in agriculture, we have its applications. Why? Because we already seen that we could be able to detect the moisture levels. Okay, and also we could make observations upon the observations of the earth surfaces. Thus, we'll be able to know the crop yields, irrigation, how we could pursue irrigation facilities to know the alignment of the surfaces, to see that irrigation facilities could be provided efficiently, etc. And we could also monitor infrastructure, like for example, oil spills, urbanization, and deforestation, etc., through radars. And the climate change, especially, is of prominent importance to us. Why? Because we could be able to detect, we could detect the sea level changes, glacier retreat, etc., as we have seen. We could measure the ice level changes that occur on the Earth's surface through the radar. Now let us look into another article. Coming to the article on the tunnel disaster that has been witnessed in Uttarakhand. We have seen that again and again, time and again, the tunnels constructed or the dams that have been constructed are witnessing disasters or experiencing disasters. This is because of the topography of the region as well as the seismic activity that is actively being observed there on account of the collision between the Indian plate as well as the Eurasian plate. In this article, we will try to examine the regions or the causes behind the disaster. The title of the article is To Build Tunnel Rock Must Be Thoroughly Examined, More Time Spent on Studies. As the name suggests, we need to detail analysis of the soil contents, the rocky terrain, etc. And then we have to go ahead with the project constructions rather than going without any thorough examination. The relevance is disaster related, and for mains, disaster and disaster management. The context is the recent disaster that has led to trapping of 40 workers inside the tunnel, and the active disaster response team is now trying to rescue these workers. The possible causes of the collapse are the loose patch of rock, that is, the rock is not consolidated enough to hold the structure like tunnel. The patch of rock is loose, it is fragile and weak. Next, the seepage of water. The water seepage, especially due to the patches of rocks which are loose, could ultimately lead to their inability to stabilize the structures that are constructed above it. Next, the geological activity in the seismic zone. that is Himalayan zone, as you know, is seismically very active, and the possibility of the seismic waves that are released beneath the surface on account of the collision of the plate could ultimately destabilize the region, and the traveling of these seismic waves could lead to the inability to hold the strength of these waves, which could ultimately lead to the disastrous consequences. The measures that are to be carried out are to investigate thoroughly on the profile of the rock, conducting seismic tests to see whether the construction or constructed projects could withstand these activities of seismic zones, and petrographic analysis or the detailed analysis of the rock, soil, etc. Next is we have to monitor it thoroughly using the instruments like stress meters, deformation meters, etc. And we have to bring in the experts, the geologists, to understand the topography of the land, whether it is suitable for the projects to be constructed or not. And thus, in this way, we'll be able to tackle the possible disasters and avoid the disasters if we study it preliminarily and then give a go ahead to such projects. Now let us look into another article. Coming to the article, PM has launched scheme targeting the particularly vulnerable tribal groups and the tribal groups for their upliftment. The title of the article is PM launches 24,000 crore scheme for vulnerable tribal groups. The relevance of the article is we'll learn about particularly vulnerable tribal groups and the measures that have been recently initiated by the Government of India and were declared by Prime Minister. UPSC Mains, the relevance is learning about the welfare schemes for vulnerable sections. The context is PM launched rupees 24,000 crore project, and under it he has also honored the legendary icon of tribals, that is Birsa Munda of Jharkhand. Now let us look into what the particularly vulnerable tribal groups are. See, as the name itself suggests, they are particularly vulnerable. And not all the tribal groups are designated as particularly vulnerable tribal groups. That itself is an indication that there are certain tribal groups which are extremely backward. And we could recognize these tribal groups through the traits, that is, their socio-economic developmental levels, their level of learning, etc. etc. The way we could recognize is the technology that they use is pre-agricultural. The literacy levels are extremely low, and the economy is subsistent in nature. That is, they earn enough to meet their daily. The examples are Saharias, Sentinels, Great Andamanis, Jarawas, etc. Let us look into the commissions which talked about or which have explained about the situations of the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Firstly, it is the Debar Commission which has given the name to these groups as primitive tribal groups, which is dependent upon the traits of these tribal groups. Later on in the year 2006, Government of India has named them as PVTGs, that is particularly vulnerable tribal groups. As of now, only 75 groups have been identified as PVTGs out of 705 scheduled tribes. In the state which has the highest number of PVTGs is Odisha. You need to know this number because already we have a PYQ on PVTGs. Next is the scheme PM Janjati Adivasi Nyaya Maha Abhiyan, PM Janman. About the scheme, the budget that was sanctioned is 24,000 crores. It will tackle the issues that are faced by the tribals to extend facilities like food, nutrition, healthcare, drinking water, etc. And Union government has launched this scheme to reach out to tribal groups and PVTGs, that is nothing but primitive tribes. And it is said that most of them inhabit forest regions. Thus, it will target around closely 22,000 villages of the country. Now let us look into another scheme, that is Vikasit Bharat Sankalp Yatra. As the name itself suggests, Yatra, it's a campaign. It's a campaign done by Government of India to spread awareness to the tribals, to spread awareness regarding the benefits that they are going to get through the measures taken by the government. The benefits with regards to the welfare initiatives like the education, etc., that we have seen in the previous slides. Yatra will enable to register the potential beneficiaries, that is, the individuals who are eligible to get benefits from the welfare initiatives of the central government. And it will be done through IEC campaigning, that is, information, education, and communication campaign. It will be done through the vans. What is the main aim is to conduct yatra through all the villages by 25th January 2024. So this date is important. Why? Because it comes prior to our Republic Day. Now let us look into the tribal hero, that is Birsa Munda. He is a tribal freedom fighter. Birsa Munda has fought on behalf of the Munda tribes by mobilizing them. And he has also initiated a religion called Birsait religion, where he himself is the God's messenger. He is also involved in affairs, activities to reduce the spread of superstitious beliefs that was seen in these tribes. And is also leader of the Munda rebellion that has been carried out in the year 1899 and 1900. And we also honor Birsa Munda through Janjatiya Gaurav Divas. It is declared on 15th November as Janjatiya Gaurav Divas on account of the birthday of Munda, that is Birsa Munda. Now let us practice certain prelims questions out of the knowledge that we have learned from the articles that we have seen until now. The prelims practice question, the first question is with regards to NISAR, that is NASA ISRO Synthetic Aperture Radar. Consider the following statements regarding NISAR. The first one is the geosynchronous satellite launch vehicle Mark III will be used to launch NISAR. This statement is false because it is launched by Mark II. The next statement is the mission will be placed in polar sun synchronous orbit. This is true. Next is the mission will last for 10 years. The life expanse of the mission is not 10 years. It is expected to stay around for 3 years. So this too is false. The mission will survey Earth's land and ice covered surface every 30 days. This too is false. So the correct statements from the above are only one. So answer is A, only one. Now let us look into another question on the NISAR with regards to the applications. The applications of the NISAR: drought monitoring, yes, disaster management, climate change, and infrastructure monitoring. It has the capability to be applicable for all these possibilities. So the answer is D, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now let us look into another question on the 7th schedule and the federalism of Indian Constitution. Having a 7th schedule best explains the concept of administrative delegation and direct democracy. This is false. Why? Because 7th schedule delineates states list, central list, and concurrent list with regards to the jurisdiction in terms of legislative domains of center and state. That is, in these lists of subjects, the particular government could undertake legislative activities. Of course, it is not the government, it is a legislature which does on behalf of the government. And thus, it is not with regards to administrative delegation. Added to it, direct democracy is completely out of question because presently India practices indirect democracy through elected representatives, which it sends to the legislature. Next statement is agreement among the federal units is one of the important features of Indian federalism. Indian federalism is not on account of the agreement between various states. In fact, the boundaries of the states are not uniform, standard, or universal. They could be changed, and they could be changed with the will or by the will of the parliament. Even the will of the states peoples is not required to change the boundaries. Ultimately, it is a constitution which envisioned that India to function as a federal state for administrative well-being or other factors rather than the decision of the state. So this too is false. Which of the above statements are correct with respect to Indian federalism? So the answer is none of the above. Answer is D. Now let us look into another question on particularly vulnerable tribal groups. PVTGs are first identified by British as a separate section in India. This is false. It has been done after independence, where the name PVTGs was assigned to the tribal groups which are particularly vulnerable. Chenchu tribe is a PVTG mainly belongs to Andhra Pradesh and Telangana who sustain by hunting. This is true. Next is there are 95 PVTGs. This is false. We actually have 75 PVTGs and most of them, that is the majority. A stagnant or declining population is one of the criteria to determine who a PVTG is. This is true. So the answer is 2 and 4 are right. Choose the incorrect. He asked us to choose which are incorrect. So the answer is C, only 1 and 3. Now let us look into mains practice question. The question is critically discuss whether same-sex marriage has to be given legal recognition or should it be restricted considering the opposition from the society. Okay, we already know that society is an opposition, as we have seen a survey which exclusively states that most of the, that is greater than 50% of Indians are against same-sex marriage. The approach is introduction, write a global debate, a global perspective, and try to align it with India to show that there is some variance in terms of recognition of same-sex marriage. And present the central question. Give the arguments pro and against, which we have already seen in the article. And elaborate on the pro and against arguments in the body, which deals with various aspects like human rights. We have to deal with the privacy right, dignity, etc., etc. Equality, because Article 14 is in violation here. Social progress, how it will impact the young generation or how it will change the norms of the society. At the same time, inclusivity, how we can unleash the potential of the society by including them in our developmental processes and promoting social inclusion and democratic values, that is, giving them equal voice by assigning them or extending the rights that we generally enjoy, and public opinion, societal opposition to actually comprehend how it is difficult to balance extension of rights and restricting the rights to be exercised by this section. In conclusion, right, there is a necessity for legal recognition accompanied by societal dialogue which promotes inclusivity and tolerance, which is a good conclusion that will try to balance both extension of rights and restricting the rights as well. So this completes today's daily news analysis followed by the questions. Please like, share and subscribe this channel. Thank you.